My wife said, "I can't live in this boring suburban house," and left for a city guy. I replied, "I understand." I used that boring house to buy the entire floor of the apartment building she and her new boyfriend just moved into. Her face went pale when the manager said, "You'll have to speak to the floor's owner, ma'am." The failure of my marriage wasn't just a signed paper, it was a simple clash of architectural philosophies. It happened in the quiet, and it was about a house. That suburban ranch, which I paid for and meticulously maintained, was the very foundation of my life. For me, its sturdy structure and its paid-for security represented freedom and stability. But for my wife, Clara, that house was merely the most profound symbol of my failure. She saw the suburbs, the quiet neighborhood, and the lack of chaos as evidence of a life not worth living. She consistently referred to our home as the cage, or the most boring building in the Western Hemisphere. I'm Marcus Thorne, and my work is managing multi-million-dollar logistical chains. I value systems, predictability, and efficiency, principles that made me financially secure. Clara, an image consultant, despised this predictability. She loved the paycheck, but she detested the fact that my substantial income came from managing spreadsheets for trucks. She would introduce me to her clientele with subtle disdain. "Marcus manages trucks. He's safe." She wanted me to be a risk taker, a man whose assets were visible and liquid. I let her believe my operations manager's salary was the totality of my wealth. What she never knew was that while she focused on superficial consumption, I was applying my mastery of logistics, the same skills she mocked, to a hidden enterprise. I had been quietly investing in and eventually acquired a controlling interest in 3 highly rated Manhattan restaurants. My job in logistics was my deliberate alibi. It kept my true, much higher value invisible and prevented her from calculating my net worth. The contempt was the constant, high-pitched background noise of our lives. The final break came when she found Andrew. He was the broker with the high-rise apartment and the endless empty promises, the speed, the chaos, the superficiality she craved. She walked into my office 2 weeks ago, having finally made her choice. She looked at the stability I'd sacrificed for her and delivered the final verdict on my worth. "I can't live in this boring suburban house anymore," she said. Her voice weighted with contempt for the life I had built. "I'm leaving for Andrew." She waited for tears. She waited for a desperate fight. But I just looked at the woman who had judged my soul based on a suburban zip code. "I understand," I replied. I understood her betrayal, and I understood exactly how I would use the equity of the boring suburban house she despised to buy my ultimate freedom. "Tassun, are you finished yet?" Andrew is waiting. Man, that was the sound of my marriage collapsing right there. It wasn't a sudden yell or a huge fight, it was my wife's voice, tight with impatience, peering down the basement stairs. Her eyes were already on the man waiting in her car. Look, the divorce wasn't about the affair alone. It was the crushing weight of her absolute disrespect for everything I actually was. I had to audit the cost of her contempt before I pulled the plug on everything. The turning point wasn't financial, it was pure humiliation. I was down in the garage fixing a serious issue with our water heater. It was a messy, miserable job that saved us thousands in emergency fees. She looked at me, covered in dust, and delivered the final judgment on my worth. She said I was just a live-in maintenance man. That felt like a punch. It was a realization that she was actively ashamed of the actual labor and the practical mind that kept her lifestyle afloat. I saw the truth then. Her stability wasn't built on our commitment, but on my availability as a guaranteed deadline. The financial records confirmed it. She had just bought a designer watch worth $12,000. She charged it directly to our joint credit line despite my clear objection. When I questioned the charge the next morning, she just sneered. "It's not my fault you make such a modest salary, Marcus. A professional woman must look the part. You'll pay it, you always do." The anger was gone, replaced by cold, calculated calm. Her arrogance was my only way out. I contacted the realtor that same week. I told them to list the suburban house immediately. I didn't care about the market. I needed the highest cash offer possible, and I needed it fast. The $400,000 equity, the proceeds of the boring life she despised, was about to become my war chest. Then I secured my real wealth. I called my secret broker. I made sure the full ownership of my 3 Manhattan restaurants was moved into a shielded holding company. I made sure she could never touch the true foundation of my financial power. The final absurdity came when she called, demanding I cover the expenses one last time. She wanted me to pay the final 3 months of the Suburban mortgage before she moved out. "It's the least you can do, Marcus," she demanded, her voice laced with finality. "I understand, Clara," I replied, my voice completely level. "I will ensure the finances are handled by the end of the week." She thought she was demanding a final, pathetic favor. She had no idea she was demanding the accelerated liquidation of the only asset she thought she had leverage over. That boring suburban house was about to buy me the entire floor of her new life. I didn't wait for the ink to dry on my promise. The moment Clara hung up, demanding I pay the final mortgage, I knew I had the window I needed. She thought she was tying me down. She was actually accelerating the sale of her own undoing. I called my realtor, a sharp, discreet woman named Sharon. I was frank. "The house is listed immediately. I need the highest cash offer possible and the deal must close in under 2 weeks." Sharon was surprised. "Marcus, 2 weeks for a suburban property? Why the rush?" "I'm funding a new, urgent acquisition," I replied, using the kind of business jargon she respected. "Liquidity is critical." I told her my real motive was the constant low-grade resentment the house carried. I wanted the symbol of my stability gone, transformed into pure, portable power. Sharon got the job done. Within 48 hours, I had 2 strong cash offers. I accepted the highest one, ensuring the $400,000 equity, the full, uncompromised value of my quiet labor, was immediately wired to a new holding account. The suburban chapter of my life closed with a simple bank wire notification. The boring house was gone, replaced by a massive liquid war chest. Next, I tracked my target. Clara had been careless in her excitement. I used my network to pinpoint the exact high-rise near Millennium Park she and Andrew were moving into. I got the precise address, the floor plans, and the contact information for the building's primary holding company. I contacted my commercial real estate broker, a man named John, I'd cultivated through my Manhattan restaurant holdings. My directive was precise. I need full ownership of that entire floor. I want the hostile acquisition to be clean, silent, and fast. The funds are available immediately from a new holding company. John didn't question the sudden, unique demand. He simply confirmed the logistics. The money from the despised suburban house was now the leverage necessary to control her new life. While the contracts were being drafted, I had one last move to maintain the illusion of my poverty. Clara called again, demanding final confirmation of the paid mortgage. "Marcus, where's the transfer?" "Andrew's broker is asking for proof of final address clearance." I sent her a PDF document, a fake receipt I had quickly designed, confirming the final mortgage payment had been covered. "There's your proof, Clara," I texted back. "The house is clear. Enjoy your new life." She never questioned the document's authenticity. She was too busy celebrating her victory over my finances. She had no idea that while she was signing her apartment lease, I was signing the purchase agreement for the floor directly beneath her. The boring suburban house was gone. Its equity, the $400,000 cash from the sale, was now sitting in a newly established holding account. I had traded the symbol of Clara's disgust for pure, undeniable financial power. The next step required absolute silence and military-grade logistical precision. I called John, my commercial real estate broker in Manhattan, the one who handled my secret restaurant properties. "John, I have an urgent acquisition," I told him. "I need the entire 23rd floor of the Millennium Heights building near the park. Cash offer, expedited closure." John paused, which was unusual for him. "The whole floor, Marcus? That's 6 luxury units and a large penthouse. That's a significant investment just to add to your portfolio." "It's not about the portfolio, John. It's about control." I explained that the purchase had to be finalized and the deed transferred before the first of the month. I gave him one non-negotiable condition: The ownership must be masked under a silent LLC, and my name could never appear on the building's residential management logs. John understood the assignment immediately. He specialized in quick, discreet transactions for clients who valued anonymity above all else. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. I was liquidating a fully paid suburban home to buy an entire floor of luxury apartments in Chicago, all to exert control over the one unit my ex-wife was moving into with her new broker boyfriend. The complexity of the deal was immense. It required negotiating 6 separate leases, transferring utilities, and finalizing the purchase of the penthouse unit in just 10 days. But my career was built on managing variables under extreme time constraints. I treated the acquisition like I treated a major shipping contract. Every task itemized, every lawyer briefed, every potential failure point mitigated. I wanted the building manager, the concierge, and the security team to know my name, but my ex-wife was the only person who had to remain completely unaware of my new identity. The contracts were signed on a Friday afternoon. The moment the deed transferred and the wire was confirmed, the suburban house Clara hated had officially bought her new glittering cage. I called John immediately. "The deal is complete," he confirmed. "You own the 23rd floor. The management has been briefed on the new ownership structure. You have absolute authority over all maintenance, leases, and residential conduct. I now own the floor where she and Andrew plan to start their new, glamorous life." She thought she was trading up to freedom. She had actually traded her autonomy for a permanent residency under my direct authority. The countdown began. Clara and Andrew were scheduled to move in within the week, completely oblivious that their new landlord was the man she had called a boring maintenance man. I didn't plan to evict them. Eviction would be too kind. I planned to use my ownership to exert subtle, precise control over their lives, to remind her, slowly and continuously, exactly who held the power. I was ready for the inevitable moment when she would complain about the air conditioning or the plumbing. I was ready for the manager to deliver the punchline she had been setting up for months. Clara and Andrew moved into their luxury unit completely oblivious that their new landlord was the man Clara had scorned. They thought they had ascended to a life free of the blue-collar maintenance I represented. They were wrong. I didn't plan any dramatic sabotage. I simply pulled the maintenance request logs for their specific unit. The building was high-end but old. It had temperamental, expensive systems. The silent war began on their second day. First, the garbage disposal, which Clara insisted was European quality, jammed on a shrimp tail. Andrew spent an hour trying to fix it with a broom handle, filling their luxury unit with the sound of frustration. They filed a maintenance request, assuming it would be handled swiftly. It wasn't. My manager, John, had strict orders. Prioritize all other units on the floor, but let the issue in Unit 2304 simmer for 48 hours. The next problem was the air conditioning. The unit in their apartment began to blow warm air, turning their sleek, glass-walled space into a humid, uncomfortable greenhouse. This was critical for Clara. She couldn't afford to have her makeup melt before a high-profile client meeting. Andrew, the city broker, was useless with anything involving a wrench. He called maintenance repeatedly, his voice growing more irritated with each attempt. The glamorous, effortless city life Clara had traded me for was dissolving into domestic inconvenience. I watched the escalating logs on my remote laptop screen, a cold satisfaction settling over me. Every complaint about a jammed disposal or a broken AC unit was proof that their high-status life relied entirely on the practical competence they despised. The final catalyst came late Tuesday afternoon. Clara had a crucial business dinner, but the humidity in their apartment had ruined her hair and smudged her professional composure. The AC was still blowing warm. She erupted at Andrew, blaming him for choosing the unit and for not having the competence to fix the issue himself. "This is ridiculous," she shrieked. "I left Marcus to escape this kind of suburban nonsense." They decided the management team had to be publicly shamed. They marched down to the luxurious ground floor lobby, ready to use their high rent and social status to demand immediate service. I was already waiting in a private lounge just off the main desk. I had arrived minutes earlier, dressed in a sharp, quiet suit. Not the messy maintenance clothes she expected, but the uniform of a controlling owner. They strode up to the desk where John, my manager, stood waiting. Clara slammed her hand on the counter, her voice loud and demanding. drawing the attention of the other high-profile residents. We need the air conditioning fixed in 2304 immediately. This building is unacceptable. We are paying premium rates for broken service. John remained utterly calm, a true professional. He listened to their entire arrogant tirade about the broken appliance, the inconvenience, and the absolute lack of respect shown to premium tenants. He paused, then picked up the desk phone. His next words were the final, irreversible setup for the massive humiliation that was about to unfold. He looked directly at Clara, his eyes showing a faint, dry pity. "I apologize, ma'am," John said calmly. "You'll have to speak to the floor's owner directly. He just arrived." "I apologize, ma'am," John said calmly. "You'll have to speak to the floor's owner directly. He just arrived." The lobby was utterly silent. Clara stood frozen at the counter, her mouth slightly open, confusion warring with the furious adrenaline of her recent tirade. Andrew, the city broker, straightened his tie, looking ready to introduce himself to a potential new client. He had no idea he was about to meet his downfall. I stepped out of the private lounge, closing the heavy glass door with a quiet click. I was dressed in a simple, sharp gray suit, the uniform of a man who owned the building, not the man who managed its spreadsheets. My footsteps were measured as I walked toward the front desk. John nodded respectfully. The initial shock hit Clara first. She recognized my profile, my calm demeanor, the very stillness she had so despised in the suburbs. "Marcus?" she whispered, the name catching in her throat, thin with disbelief. Andrew, oblivious, stepped forward, offering his hand. "Andrew Stevens, I'm a new resident in 2304. We appreciate you coming down so quickly, sir. We are having serious issues with the HVAC unit." I ignored his hand entirely. I walked directly to the counter and addressed John, my voice cold and clear. "John, did you receive the maintenance log for Unit 2304? The one concerning the warm air?" "Yes, Mr. Thorne," John replied. "The AC unit is currently set to be serviced by the end of the week." I nodded, then slowly turned back to Clara and Andrew. Clara's face was completely white. "It's true, Ilara," I said, using the name she hadn't heard me use since our divorce filing. "I am the owner of the floor you currently reside on. And the complex maintenance issue you are having is now entirely my problem." The entire lobby seemed to hold its breath. Clara looked between Andrew, the manager, and me, the man she left for being too boring to afford the city life. Andrew finally realized the gravity of the situation. You bought the whole floor?" he stammered. "The proceeds from the boring suburban house covered the acquisition quite nicely," I confirmed. "It turns out the suburbs were more profitable than you assumed." Clara let out a strangled cry, her voice cracking with the ultimate humiliation. She knew this wasn't just about money. It was about the complete, surgical invalidation of every premise she had ever built her life upon. "You planned this," she hissed, pointing a shaking finger. "You are a sociopath. You let me sign the lease knowing you would own the building." "You plan to take my retirement and destroy my reputation," I countered. "I simply chose the terms of our final separation." "You told the waiter I could only afford dinner because you were taking everything?" "Now let me correct the record." I looked directly at John, asserting my ultimate control. "John, inform the residents of Unit 2304 that all future maintenance and lease issues will be handled directly by the owner. Furthermore, their rent is now subject to immediate annual review by the new holding company." Andrew's face went pale. His entire career relied on maintaining a flawless image of success and high status. Being known as the tenant of the man his girlfriend scorned was instant professional death. Clara's total breakdown began. She screamed, not about the money, but about the unfairness of being outsmarted. "You can't do this. I have friends. We will leave." "You are welcome to leave anytime, Clara," I said, "but I won't evict you. I bought this floor precisely to ensure that for the foreseeable future you will always be living under the authority of the man you called a live-in maintenance man." I turned back to John. "Please send the AC repair team up immediately. The owners of the 23rd floor expect prompt service." Clara's screaming died the moment she realized her shame was recorded by every high-profile security camera in the lobby. She didn't try to stop me. She and Andrew simply walked out of the building, defeated, their quick footsteps clicking against the polished stone as they left the scene of their total public collapse. The final legal motions were clean. I filed for divorce, ensuring Clara received a minimal, fair settlement based on my disclosed salary, while the $3 million in restaurant holdings remained untouchable in the holding company. The unique punishment, however, was psychological and ongoing. I didn't evict them. Eviction would have ended the joke too soon. I used my authority immediately. I instructed John to service every single HVAC unit on the 23rd floor, except Unit 2304. I wanted the other 5 units to experience perfect Arctic cold air, while Clara and Andrew remained in their humid, miserable greenhouse. The effect was instantaneous and maddening. Clara called John the next day, demanding action. John, the consummate professional, replied, "I apologize, ma'am. We are aware of the issue. The owner has prioritized a full diagnostic report for your specific unit. It is being handled directly." The stress turned Andrew into a wreck. He realized he was financially trapped, renting an expensive apartment that was being deliberately mismanaged by the man his girlfriend scorned. His friends started asking questions about the lobby scene, and his sales career, which relied on effortless image, began to crumble. The small acts of defiance became endless. A simple plumbing issue in their unit was met with a 3-week maintenance delay. Their complaints about noisy neighbors were subtly rerouted back to their own door. Clara saw her image consultant career implode because she couldn't maintain the facade of a clean, effortless life. She realized her escape to the city had bought her a permanent residency under my quiet, absolute authority. After 6 months, I had seen enough. I sold my interest in the restaurant chain and the logistics firm. I had proven my point and reclaimed my self-worth. The money from the sale bought me a clean, quiet life. But I kept one asset, Unit 2304. I retained ownership of the entire floor under a silent, unbreakable trust. I never raised their rent. I just ensured their maintenance requests were always handled by a very slow, very expensive external contractor. I often thought about the finality of the joke. Clara thought my stability was useless. I used that useless stability to buy the entire stage of her new life. I didn't want to ruin her. I wanted her to wake up every morning in that high-rise, look at the beautiful city, and remember that the quiet man she mocked was the only reason she had a roof over her head.